Hey everyone, it's Irene here. Welcome to this Q&A live chat on the 8th of December, 2022. I am Irene Lyon, and if you are new to me, I am a nervous system expert, a somatic practitioner. I am trained in quite a few things. Just to give you a quick overview while we get folks on here live, I have a background in exercise physiology, biomedical science, research. I am trained in something called the Feldenkrais method, as well as somatic experiencing. This is the work of Dr. Peter Levine, and also many branches from that, namely the work of Kathy Kane and Stephen Trell, which focuses more on working with pre-verbal early trauma and the somatic neurophysiology. Of course, I'm trained in all ways in the theory of the polyvagal theory, because of course polyvagal is not a practice, it is a concept of how our autonomic nervous system works. And no doubt that will play in today. So I have quite a few questions that were submitted, and I'm not going to get to all of them. But what I will say as a general overview, as I read the questions, the same answer will come out. There are nuances, but at the core of the work that I teach my students, and again, for those of you new here, let me know if you're new here. Let me know if you're an alum from my courses and programs. Let me know if you have done a drop-in class, if you've been watching my videos here on YouTube for a while. What you will inevitably see as you hang out with me is that there's sort of these basic principles and tenets that I teach and educate people on. And that is understanding your nervous system physiology. And then from there, doing the practices, I call them neurosensory exercises. And I have other videos on these specifically. But doing these neurosensory exercises that allow us to connect, learn, listen, be in our bodies in a way that is manageable, and we can basically, in some ways, I'll be honest, stomach it. For many of us, if we had been brought up in so much abuse and trauma and adversity, being in our bodies will sometimes be the last place we want to be, right? So we need to get back to this body. And for many of us, for many of you, many of the symptoms and problems are a result of not being connected accurately to our body. Often our body is shut down, or it is revving with what we would call fight flight. So this is the protective mechanisms, but also disconnecting, going into a shutdown response, being more frozen in our sensations and emotions. That also is a protective response. So part of this work, in addition to learning, is reconnecting with the system. That's what I teach in my programs and online courses. You will not get that here today on this Q&A call because this is information-based. And then the other thing that we want to do with our practice, our apprenticeship, is reconnect to the environment, reconnect to the world around us. So even right now, as I say that, have you taken time today to actually pause and see the world around you? That's an honest question that I'm asking that right now. Let me know. Because if we can't connect consciously and then also unconsciously with our environment in a way that is good, but also is alert to dangers, we have some work to do. So there's sort of three pieces that I just mentioned. One is making sure we have education, which again, I teach in depth in my programs and courses, and we'll get to some of that today. The second is these neurosensory exercises that get us back into this physical system of ours so that we can recalibrate, we can listen, because our emotions and sensations live in the body. And if we can't accurately listen to the body, we cannot process emotions and sensations, which is key for nervous system health and releasing trauma and restoring safety back to the world, back to us in this world. And then the second is how we connect to the environment. Many mind-body practices are good at getting into the physical body, maybe into the higher brain, but very often they leave out how we interact with the environment and also how we interact with our deeper organ systems that go into fight, flight, and freeze when we've had a lifetime of trauma, or let's just say an acute stress. So I'm going to just pop in here to the chat. Hello from Europe. Hello from someone doing the 21-day nervous system tune-up program. You're loving it. That's great. Hello from, it looks like the Netherlands. Someone is asking a question about toxic relationships, toxic people. I'm actually going to be releasing a video this weekend on that. So just keep your eyes and ears out for that. And be sure to watch that one. So I won't answer that question right now. Hello from Amsterdam and hello from the UK. Hello from Slovenia. Great. All right. So what I will say again is I encourage everyone after this chat, after this Q&A, to go and check out my website, see what is there, and really start some of the practices so that you can start to engage into this work. Hello to an SBSMer. Thank you. SBSM, Smart Body, Smart Mind. This is my online course. It's a 12-week curriculum. And that is something that we run usually once a year. We're going to run it again in March. So registration will open in February. We can pop the link in. And for those of you who want to learn more about that, I really do recommend it. That really is in many ways the gold standard online course currently in the world for restoring nervous system regulation and capacity to our systems. Okay. I want to start with a question that came from Cleo from YouTube. And it was posted on a video that was from over 2 years ago, but this was a recent question. And what they asked was, how do we work? How do we work? And she put in brackets work at feeling like we deserve to heal. Feeling like we deserve to heal. Practically is the question. I'm trying to convince myself to do Smart Body, Smart Mind. But that old programming of all that money just for you pops up as well. So Smart Body, Smart Mind is not, a $10 program. It is just under $2,000 US. So I'll be completely honest. And it is a big piece of finance for some of us to put out in one go. That's why we have a payment plan over 12 months. And I want everyone to understand we could say the consequences of not healing our nervous system, of not getting into our body. The research really does show through something called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study that when we have had adversity growing up, and it doesn't have to be abuse, it could be surgical interventions from a very young age. It could be living in a war-torn country. It could be natural disasters that just keep happening over and over again. This happens in many locations, geographical locations. It could be that mom and dad were actually very loving, but they were completely disconnected from us. And they didn't have that nurture energy, even though they treated us really well. So I want to make that very clear, because some folks will say, this doesn't make sense. Does anybody here have that? This doesn't make sense. I actually had shelter and food, and there wasn't war, and there were no natural disasters, and I didn't have surgical interventions. And mom and dad were every night at the dinner table. They drove me to school. We did all these things. Why am I so unwell? And so it can be a lack of attunement to us when we're young. And so I say this to answer this question about the deserving to heal. And I'll speak to that also in a second. when we work at the nervous system level and we really get the skill and the mastery down that is taught in Smart Body, Smart Mind, all these pieces of our life improve. Not only our physiology, our internal systems, organs, immunity, capacity, physical strength shifts, our ability to think changes, our ability to be in the environment changes, which means that we are better able to protect ourselves in dangerous situations. The other thing that occurs is we forward ourselves into the work that we're supposed to do, whether that's career or raising a family or serving the community or traveling or being creative or whatever. So often our programming, and this person, Cleo, said, this program, old program, that's a lot of money. In order to break out of the programming, we have to work on our biological nervous system. I haven't seen any other way for this to occur in a way that is long-term. Yes, we might be able to work with a mindset coach or a behavior change coach where we're shifting our behaviors, we're actively doing things differently from a behavioral point of view, like eating better and our list of to-dos, we're making sure we're checking off, we're doing all the things. But if under that behavior is a biology that is struggling, afraid, shut down, unsure, scared of the world, the amount of energy that we waste in trying to willpower into these behaviors is vast. It's just so much energy wasted. So what I like to say is, how can you see this learning of the nervous system as just something that is essential? Does that make sense? Because if we don't get it on board, if we don't get that self-regulation on board, we will continually, and of course I'm making a huge assumption here, but I've been doing this work for 25 years. And I've worked and seen thousands of people shift out of their biology running their behavior to their higher consciousness running their behavior. But that only tends to happen when they gain nervous system regulation, when they are in a state of well-being where they're not living based on their past traumas and stresses. They're living in the moment. And sure, a stress, a trauma is going to come in. And it's going to impact the physiology because we want it to, right? Just like I have a cut here. I cut myself on my husband's razor the other night. I put my hand in the drawer to get some scissors and I didn't realize his blade was open and I sliced my finger. I want my system to go into automatic protection mode of clotting mechanisms and pain. So I know that it's happened. So I can protect it. I can cover it, all those things. So we want to have biological fight, flight, and freeze responses, but for things that are occurring in the moment. But so many of us live now because of things that occurred in the past. And so to come back to this primary question, Cleo, how do we work at feeling like we deserve to heal? There isn't one answer. It comes down to, what do you want your life and your body and your physiology and your career and your relationships to look like when you are in your older years, when you are 5 years from now? And again, this is just from experience. When we don't work at this level, we lose a very important part of our, we could say, birthright. And what I mean by that is all humans are designed to know how to be in self-regulation, to be in creativity. But for so many of us, it gets completely squashed when we're little because of those parents, let's just say, that don't attune to us and don't provide us safety and all the things that we need as a human being to grow and mature at all the levels, not just physically, not just mentally, but emotionally, we could say spiritually, soul-wise, connected to creativity, all those things. So if you look at it in that grand scale, and I will say our students who are older, and by older, I mean folks in their 80s, in their 70s, in their 60s, and even people in their 50s, they will say, I so wish I had known this when I was young, or when I was 30, or when I was 20, because my life would have been completely friggin' different. And they know that because in doing this work in their 80s and 70s, they have seen massive shifts because they're giving their system the juice of what it needs now in that moment. The system can always heal. So again, coming back, how do we work at feeling like we deserve it? We have to look at the consequences of not, and then the desire to be well and vital. Okay. I think that answers that question. And then the other thing that I will add there is the amount of, we'll say, money, resources that we put in to our health when we don't have nervous system regulation is huge, right? We will need to go to doctors. We might need medication. We might need assistance when we're older because our mental health has declined. We might need help physically because our nervous system capacity was so low in our 50s and 60s that we didn't keep our muscle mass. These things all connect. Because we didn't move, we might be metabolically unfit. It might lead to, again, these are just hypotheticals, but diabetes, hormone problems, the things that happen when we don't use our body. So another big part of having nervous system regulation on board is that we can be more vigorous. We need to move our physical body. My background is in exercise science. And I studied so much stuff that showed the importance of us being active in a vigorous, intense way, not just going for an easy stroll every day. Physical activity, physical exercise, strength training. And so if we're not doing that because we have low capacity, there will be problems later in life. And it's not to scare anyone, it's just the truth. So what a great question, Cleo. So thank you for that. Yeah, I tend to always have something on my finger, don't I? Someone says, I've watched many of your videos with a Band-Aid on your finger. I cook a lot. That's the other thing. Okay, I'm just going to check out our chat. I'm going to have a little water. Someone asks, Thomas, hello from Denmark. Will smoking weed, so that's cannabis, marijuana, occasionally, say once every 2 to 3 weeks, set you back in your healing process? Can you share your thoughts on how it impacts this work? I can't totally answer that because I don't know your system, Thomas. And of course, everyone's different, but I'll speak in a general way. From what I've seen for the most part, many of us don't know how to take in these medicines because marijuana can be seen as that, just like tobacco is a sacred medicine in many cultures, not the cigarettes you buy at the corner store, like real clean tobacco that hasn't been messed with, right? No chemicals. Many people in more, we could say, Western world have no clue, and I'm not saying this is you, Thomas, but have no clue how to sense their bodies, how to be with that medicine and really let it be informing a process, of that. We tend to abuse. Now, of course, if it's only every 2 to 3 weeks, that might be different. And so it depends. How is your interaction with it? Is it to de-stress, or is it to ignore life, or is it to consciously sit down or be in nature or meditate or move or create? Right? So I can't say yes or no on these things. It comes down to, what is your interaction? Back to what I said at the top of the chat. What is your interaction with the environment? So what is your interaction with that substance? Just like, what is our interaction with food? Is it for comfort? Is it because it provides us a resource that makes us remember lovely times when we were young? And while there's nothing wrong with that, I think that humans do a little bit too much of that. I think we use food as a reward. Can food be medicine? Can food be just for nourishment? And when we can shift that, things change. I've been asking my husband if we could do a video on how to properly use such substances. So if you think that would be a good idea, let me know in the chat and I'll nudge him. I personally do not partake in any substance use, not because I am against it. It's just I'm actually quite allergic to that plant. So it depends on the person. It depends on your interaction with it. But it's the same with, let's say, it's the same with meditation. It's the same with other plant medicines. Is there an interaction, a healthy relationship with it? And that's the thing that you want to really look at. Not sure you guys can hear this, but there's a car alarm outside my door. I'll just keep going. Hopefully it isn't too disturbing on your end. Okay, I'm going to come back to a question that was submitted. So this is a question from a student, not one of my students, but from someone who is studying somatic experiencing. So they asked, I just finished my second year of somatic experiencing training. So this is something I am also trained in. It's the work of Peter Levine, but I still have so many questions. So the one thing I'll say, and the name is Sephora, I hope I say that right. Yeah, you might. And again, it's a great curriculum, but it is not everything. And what I found after that training and after I did a high level of assistantship at the trainings, at the masterclass with Peter at his level, was there wasn't enough time in that training, to practice in many different environments, right? You're usually never practicing with the public. It's only with your colleagues, your peers, which is a problem. The other thing is most of the time, there isn't enough time to explore our somatic body in the process of learning. It's theory, it's practice, it's debrief. So I want you to know that having many questions makes sense because there are many of my now colleagues who are somatic experiencing practitioners who, alongside their training, did do my curriculums, whether it was the 21-day nervous system tune-up or Smart Body, Smart Mind. And I'm not saying this because I want anyone to do the course necessarily, but what they said verbatim was, if I hadn't have done your courses alongside of SE, I would have been completely confused. And so I just offer that as real feedback that I heard from other students who are now practitioners. So you said this is your main question. If you're being triggered by a certain person a lot, do you down regulate? So use somatic tools like grounding, self-touch, orienting, or do you stay with the uncomfortable body sensation and track it? It depends. So there's no one answer here. If you are at Christmas dinner, because for some of us who celebrate Christmas, that's coming up. Let's say you're at Christmas dinner and you have a sibling that triggers the heck out of you. In that moment, it might not be the right time to track and process the trauma of that sibling, tickling you to death every week when you were growing up, which you hated, right? It might be that you have to ground and resource and take a deep breath and go for a walk and move a little bit more and just help with the dishes, furiously so that you move some of that energy out. But let's say, that you have a person with you and they're triggering you and they leave. Then maybe, yes, process the sensations, process the procedural memories that you have probably, I hope, learned in the SE training, right? The stored protective procedural memories to push that sibling off of you when they were tickling you to death, to scream at them, to kick at them, to get that anger and rage out. It could be that might happen in a different context. So It all depends on the context. It depends on who this person is. Sometimes it's never safe to process an emotion or a sensation with a person who's triggering you because they have no clue about this work. And so you don't want to put yourself into more danger or more harm's way by trying to process something with an individual that has no interest in understanding why you are being triggered, why they are activating something in your nervous system. And then you ask, because being with the uncomfortable sensation is what builds capacity in the nervous system, which helps stop being triggered eventually. And then you say, correct. And I say, it depends. If we don't have the capacity to be with an uncomfortable sensation, that actually can lower our capacity. So it depends on our existing capacity and what we can be with while staying connected to the ground, the environment, and all the things. So, you also asked, does down regulating help too? I don't love that word. I've never actually heard that word in the SE environment. I would say what maybe you're meaning is, does helping deactivate intensity help? Of course, right? So that's what we might do with resourcing, orienting, noticing our breath. But sometimes we have to hit that gas pedal so high so that we allow that frustration, that fight, that flight to break free. And that might come not with a soothing or a resourcing, but with a massive energy release of some kind of fight flight response. But then again, right, because this is not work that is linear, if a system doesn't have the capacity to process, and I'll use a word that you will learn, the energy well in the SE world, if your energy wells aren't big enough to hold the capacity of a massive cathartic fight flight expression, a deactivation of a stored traumatic procedural memory, that will actually push the system into lower capacity. So you see, Sephora, there's so much nuance to this work, and it just doesn't get captured in the basic 3-module SE training. Again, it's a great training as a baseline, but then you have to go a little deeper into understanding these nuances. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to go back to the chat here. Let's see. Joe says and asks, my nervous system is okay with my therapist, but finding it hard to calm the nervous system with everyone else, particularly with people at work. How does my nervous system not relate to everyone? It's possible that your capacity and your regulation is still low and you need to build it. And so again, there's such value in working with the therapist. And this is why I stopped my private practice, Joe, is it wasn't enough for me to see my clients, my students, just work with me. I wanted them to work with themselves, and I wanted them to work with themselves in a different environment that wasn't just the safety of my studio. I wanted them to experiment orienting and engaging out in the world, feeling their feet on the ground out in the world. How are they being activated when they're driving their car out in the world, right? Can they track these sensations out in the world? And what often occurs in even good therapy is there isn't enough time. A therapist doesn't have time to chaperone us to the grocery store and while driving and while in our home with maybe activating people around us or at our workspace, which you just said. So this is where it is, again, uber, super duper important to work on our own system. Again, if you choose to do it with my tools, wonderful. Something that teaches you how to be in your physiology when you are by yourself. I'm going to pick a thread here to early development. This is what raising a healthy human is. At the very beginning, that baby needs to be with mama or papa all the time, or the caregiver all the time. Eventually, they start moving, they start walking, they start crawling, they start going to the park, the playground, and they run to the swings and they look behind you and they see if you as a caregiver are saying, yes, that's safe, keep going. That's what builds that self-reliance in a human. And so the therapist, we could say, is allowing you to feel that safety and connection with one person. And then we need to take it up a notch to another level and differentiate so that we know how to be with ourselves in other environments, which is exactly what we have to do with children. This is why I believe, as much as I know so many people are homeschooling, and I definitely see the merit in that, there is something about having a little one go somewhere else, foreign, but still safe. And I know that's where it gets tricky with schools, somewhere, or a play group where they're being with themselves, with other humans. So that would be my answer. If that is an answer or suggestion, Joe, is it sounds like you just need more learning skills, more tools to help your system grow more capacity. Okay. All right, I'm going to get back to another question that was submitted. So this is from Britta from email. Thanks for emailing this. My question is crying, so tears, always a good thing, or can it be part of a freeze survival state? Yes, it can. Crying can be a good thing, and then it can also be a crutch. It can be a Band-Aid. It can be a cover-up, if you will, for hiding other sensations, emotions that we're not maybe as astute at dealing with. Typically, it is covering up, and again, this is just a generality, but this is what I've seen. It's covering up anger. It's covering up rage. It's covering up hate. It's covering up a desire to, kill. I've talked about anger and healthy aggression and many other videos. I have actually a whole playlist on this YouTube channel where we've compiled those videos. So check that out. And so sometimes we will literally collapse into that puddle of tears because we don't have the rubric, we don't have the learnings in our body to express that roar or that anger. So you say here then, just as a follow-up, I often have very intense dreams and wake up feeling sad and frustrated. And when I focus on the feeling, pain comes up and crying brings some relief. But I can't help but wonder if I'm keeping myself stuck by crying often. Again, I don't know your history, Britta. We've done some videos on waking up in panic, in why that might happen. I know you say you aren't waking up in panic, but I would still suggest you watch that video because it will transfer. Intense dreams can mean many things. It can mean just the processing of old memories. It could be a result of old surgical trauma. I'm just going to say these in case you have them. Surgical trauma, anesthesia. And it doesn't have to be surgeries or anesthesias that were traumatic. It could be something that was really important and life-saving. But that event of being in surgery under anesthesia is traumatic to the body. It is not natural, that kind of medicine. I think it's wonderful. I personally would probably be in a wheelchair or have an amputated leg if it wasn't for surgery and anesthesia. So I thank it all the time. But it does play with our system, plays with the unconscious. And so intense dreams can be that, could also be a near-death experience that involved near choking, near drowning, almost dying in a car accident. So if you think about something near death that's really intense, typically the response is that of fright and terror and get me the heck out of here. It's fight, flight. If we can't get out, we will then freeze, to go to your question, freeze. We will maybe dissociate, collapse, because we realize we can't get out. But under that collapse is that desire to get out. So that's why that connects to my suggestion that sometimes, often, always going to sadness and crying can be a protection mechanism from feeling fight, flight, and anger and the desire to fight and flee. So again, that is my answer to that. It looks like you're doing the 21-day nervous system tune-up, so that is wonderful. And you're also seeing a somatic experiencing practitioner, so that's wonderful. You say my symptoms are dissociation, migraines, and chronic fatigue. So what that tells me is that yes, there's something probably early in your life. Again, I'm hypothesizing that put your system into deep dissociation and shutdown due to maybe some of the things I've mentioned, or it could be, classic, not that it should be classic, but abuse, adversity from the family system. And those migraines and that fatigue is often one of the reasons is we are holding in energy, and that energy is the energy of anger and self-protection. And so you mentioned pain. That's the other ding, ding, ding word. Pain comes up. What would it be like to really follow that pain and really be alert to it and see if that pain leads you to an old protective response that needs to come out? Because again, if we don't have the capacity to move that out, we will break down crying. That makes sense? We will collapse because we feel helpless. We feel that we're again in that victim mode. So just see when this happens if you can invigorate a little bit and get some of that energy out. Great question. All right, let me have a little sip here. Thomas asks, can you recommend practically oriented books about healing early and developmental trauma? I can't, because as far as I know, there aren't any that are practical. There's some great theoretical books. One of the best ones I would say is called Nurturing Resilience by Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell. Kathy is with a K, Kane is with a K. That is a wonderful book. It's kind of the textbook that we had in our trainings, but you really can't teach this stuff over a book interface. Peter Levine's book called Healing Trauma, it's a small book. It does have some exercises, but I'm going to say this with a warning. Not everyone has success with those exercises because they're just too basic and they're not offering enough foundation around early trauma. So the practices within Smart Body, Smart Mind, again, my curriculum, get into working with the deep pre-verbal pieces that we need to work with to heal early and developmental trauma. Now, you can also do that with a practitioner who is trained, not just in somatic experiencing, because somatic experiencing does not officially train you to work with pre-verbal and early trauma. It brushes a little bit of touch work, but not enough, in my opinion, professionally and personally. So if you can work with someone who is trained with Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell, that would be my suggestion. But again, that is why I created Smart Body, Smart Mind. The practices I learned from them are taught to you in that program curriculum. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's see here. Oops, I lost my place. Oh, hey, Fergus. Fergus is one of our Smart Body, Smart Mind alum. And he is also currently working with me in a small cohort in a beta module to test out how I am going to, in the future, train people to do this work. He says, Smart Body, Smart Mind, a little unsolicited testimony here, is worth every single cent and penny. Lifetime access is the best investment you'll make in yourself. Yes, when you invest in Smart Body, Smart Mind, we let you come back over and over and over again. We never kick you out. Of course, you have to be good and not, disrupt the groups and that. So, adulting is important and maturity. But yes, if you're in good standing, you are invited to come back and ask questions and be a part of the training calls. Any new material I put out, which I have done a lot of, you get free of charge. So yeah, he's been through the course 4 times so far, and my learning and healing deepened each time. And I can vouch for that with Fergus. He's done such good work and is really I believe, on your way to working and doing this work, if you choose Fergus with others. So, yeah, it really is. I am very proud of this curriculum because it really does offer what many of us never got when we were young, and what many of us might never get in therapy, right? That's the other thing that a lot of people will say. Okay. Next question is from Michelle. Now I have another video that might complement this one, Michelle. So I'm going to just speak more generally. So can you share your perspective on how SE and Feldenkrais might be more challenging for neurodivergent folks, especially given the following are common comorbidities with autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, impulsivity, difficulty in focusing, difficulty grounding, executive dysfunction, etc. So I don't love, I'm just going to be really honest, I don't love labels like neurodivergence. You will find that I don't use it. Just like I don't love saying highly sensitive person. I have seen, again, through my years and years, that yes, humans are diverse in their ways of showing up. And a big part of this, and I don't mean our creativity, I don't mean our soul, I want to be really clear. I don't mean our authentic, kooky selves, creative selves. I mean our core biological necessities. We need the same upbringing across the board, just like a cub or a pup in the wild needs mama, needs to be fed, needs protection, needs shelter, needs to be taught how to hunt, and all those things. For so many humans, we don't get that. There is no basic standard rule yet on how to raise a healthy human. And because of that, we have these huge diversities in symptomology, syndromes. I don't like saying this, but we would say mental illness, chronic illness. When we really look at the spectrum, and I don't mean spectrum in terms of autism, I just mean the general spectrum of human differentiation, human, we could say, dis-ease. So much of it, if not most of it, and this isn't just me saying this is people like Gabor Mate saying this, Peter Levine, Besser van de Kolk, all of our leaders and pioneers, most, if not all, of these divergent properties are coming from a lack of secure attachment, safety, nurturing, cultivation, play, being vigorous with our bodies when we're young. It's so huge. And so to go back to the question about Feldenkrais will definitely be challenging for some of us who are still living with more early trauma patterns, dysregulations, dysfunctions, because Feldenkrais is a high brain, higher consciousness practice. It is not friendly for those who have dysregulation in the nervous system, because you're having to think, you're having to feel, you're having to execute, as you said, executive function here. You're having to sense, you're having to calibrate your movement step by step. That is a very high level practice. And this is why I think Feldenkrais hasn't really gotten its legs under it since it was incepted by Dr. Feldenkrais, because there is a massive majority of humans who don't have the capacity to be at that high level at the start. But what I've seen, Michelle, is that when we get regulation on board, when we learn how to have secure attachment with ourselves and the world around us, when we start attuning to our bodies and providing it all the stages of neuroplastic healing that I talk about in some other things. So look up the stages of 5 stages of neuroplastic healing sequencing. When we get those first 4 stages in place, we grow capacity, we grow regulation, we could become more clear in our biology, our system is getting what it needs, and then the behavior and our ability to interact and think and create becomes that much sharper and not hindered by survival physiology. And then from there, we can do something like the Feldenkrais method and its principles because we're not fighting a tiger, right, that is running around in our physiology. We're just totally able to connect to that higher consciousness. So that would be that question, how I would answer that question. You mentioned something here about people pleasing and fawning and masking your impulses. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I see some pretty crazy shit in this city of Vancouver, pardon my French. And I want to go up and scoop up those kids and babies or say, you shouldn't be doing that. I'm not going to do that. It's not my business. And so, yeah, there is a level of a modicum of that is not the time and place. So there is an element of having to hold back, but how can you feel those impulses inside and let them move through energetically so that you're not trapping that anger, that frustration that you might be seeing in a sea of we could say folks who are very, very shut down and aren't aware of their actions. So yeah, there's a difference between observing and feeling that intensity and processing it internally versus shutting down and not processing it versus being belligerent and really acting out in a situation that maybe shouldn't be attended to, right? So yes, a lot of this stuff, the people pleasing, it shifts. It completely shifts when we become more regulated and we really work from a place of biological impulse for us and safety. So we have to be able to attune to this isn't going to be safe if I break my politeness right now. It's actually going to cause more problems, right? So sometimes we need to assess the situation piecemeal. And this is again where that I talked about that nuance earlier. We have to have nuance. We have to have context. Those sorts of things. Okay. Karen asks, is breaking an ankle always an emotional response in the body? Well, it's definitely a sensory response. It's definitely going to be a neurophysiological response. And then how the emotion comes out is going to be dependent on, again, context. Are you at the top of a mountain and you break your ankle, living from experience? That really sucks. And then you can't break down, you can't cry, you have to be stoic and be like, okay, I'm going to have to walk down this mountain with a broken ankle. And then you might break down in a puddle of tears later. So it depends on the context, right? Again, this shows sometimes how unaware we are of the nuance that can come out of our bodies and the context in which we're in. So again, it depends on context. Sophie asks, would you recommend a somatic or any other therapist in person alongside the Smart Body, Smart Mind program, especially if emotional neglect was present and feelings are overwhelming? If one can do both, then yes. If you have the resource to have a connection with a coach or a therapist or a somatic practitioner while you are doing the Smart Body, Smart Mind program, 100%. I know many who do. I've even known of people who invested in Smart Body, Smart Mind, and they didn't do it. And then they've invested after the fact in a coach to keep them accountable, right? And so you do what makes sense for you. The one thing I will say that is becoming more apparent as I teach and teach and teach is one of we could say that the base level foundations that encompasses all of Smart Body, Smart Mind, and really any program you do, whether it's through me or someone else, is what is your relationship to learning? I really want to highlight that. What is your relationship to learning? Because if you aren't aware of that relationship, it could be that you find yourself, excuse me, in a pattern that you're not even aware of in how you learn. Does that make sense? I don't have stats on how many people invest in our courses and then never do them. I'm sure there's a chunk of people in that boat. And that's sad to me because, the person is wanting to do it. They really want to do it. And then they don't realize that their upbringing was such that they only did well at school if they got a prize at the end of the week, or they were given a pat on the back by their teacher, or they were graded. We've been so taught to be graded on our achievements academically and learning wise, that when there isn't that dangling carrot at the end, if you will, we don't have any survival response to drive forward. So I want to name that because, man, it is ingrained in so many of us that we need approval, we need praise, and we need to be told that we did such a good job. You will not get that from me, or any of our moderators who moderate the course. This is for you to engage with, but you have to find out, am I sabotaging myself because I'm looking for that person to say, what a great job you're doing? So it's important to know that. Now, some of us don't work in that manner. And it's just important to know, where do you fall on the spectrum of learning? Are you someone who needs a little bit of encouragement? And how can you have that encouragement be internal, right? How can you find a way to do this for you, not because someone else is waiting for you to be healed and better? And so that's something I'll probably be talking about a lot more as time goes forward. Okay. Someone here who's an SPSM student asks, how do you deal with the emptiness you feel that comes with living in functional freeze? Well, you keep working on getting out of functional freeze. That's the key, right? So moving out of functional freeze does not happen in just 12 weeks. I personally didn't really come out of functional freeze. I know this is going to sound crazy, until earlier this year. Everything that you've seen from me, which has probably helped many of you, and I know it has, I still had a little hint of functional freeze in my system, but I was still functional, obviously, and able to teach and live and pay my bills and have staff and show up for these things. So this emptiness it shows me, Salva, that you're still new to this, and you just have to keep working with it. And you say, I'm an SBSM student, I'm seeing some improvement, but I still feel like an empty shell sometimes. Keep moving forward. And what will be very important is that you get into eventually the healthy aggression work. Because when we get that healthy aggression work going, which is towards the later labs in Smart Body, Smart Mind, that will spark up your life force energy, and that shell will start to get filled out, and then it'll break, right? You'll break through it. Oh, Britta, there you are. The third question I answered, around the freeze and the intense dreams and crying. You had the crying question. You were born by a C-section due to the umbilical cord being wrapped around the neck and being unable to turn around in the womb. So you would have been breached, and that couldn't happen. So you had a C-section. Your mom had a C-section. So so you see, guys and gals, sometimes when you have the history, you don't have the history, but you see what's happening in a person, you can almost deduce that something occurred early that created this sense of collapse and deep terror. If you are a little one and your umbilical cord is wrapped around your neck, that is a near-death experience, my friends, and so many babies have that happen. And a lot of that, again, is, up for so many reasons why that might happen. But many mamas are stressed. They're doing too much. They're not moving in the way they should be. And little one just doesn't have the right environment to be in the way that nature intended us to come out. So again, this is where surgical intervention can be very important. And it also poses some consequences, because then we survive that. And then it isn't in place for the system to say, okay, this baby had this happen and this happened. This means that she needs to go and get some somatic experiencing work and work to help release this terror and shock from the system, right? We just aren't there yet. So I'm glad that you submitted that question, and hopefully that helped a lot of other people who may know that they had some near-death experiences also when they were growing up, when they were babies, and even in utero, right? There can be intense in utero stress from mama, and sometimes we don't think that it's important. I'm just looking here at the chat, you guys. I'm going to answer one more question. I know there were a lot more, everyone, but we'll keep plugging away at these as we come into the new year. One person asks, how come I get numb and dissociated days after I went into a few almost emotional breakthroughs, but I was interrupted in the healing process by a coach and therapist, even though I expressed myself to them. So let's unpack this. How come I get numb and dissociated? So when we get numb and dissociated, what is that, everyone? That is a freeze response. This is a part of our parasympathetic nervous system that is saying, we got to shut things down. Something's not right. We're going to go into that kind of shocky, freezy, dissociated disconnect from the body state. So we'll just put that on the blackboard for consideration. So this happens days after I went into a few almost emotional breakthroughs. So you were having some work done, it looks like, with the coach/therapist. Something was about to break through, but then for whatever reason, you were interrupted by the coach and therapist, even though you do express this stuff yourself. Well, again, I'm going to speculate, but if your body was ripe and ready to pop something out emotionally, you were on the brink of moving out a survival energy that was big, because usually emotional breakthroughs come with some form of survival energy that's been trapped. And then we release it, we get sensation. It then breeds the emotion, because emotions are built through our sensations, and then we interpret them in our brain, comes out. And then if someone says, time's up, or I don't think you can handle this, our little system goes, what? And then it hides it back in, like a turtle's head coming back into its shell, which when a turtle does that, it's because they're in shock and they sense danger. So again, not knowing all the situation, it sounds like your system was ready to move something out, something on the outside. Your therapist, for whatever reason, stopped you. It could have been the session was up. It could have been they didn't have the capacity to handle what was coming up. This is another reason why you need to interview your future therapists and practitioners. Are they doing their work? Are they comfortable with healthy aggression? Are they comfortable with big energy? Because if they're not, your system will sense that and something will get held back. So there are many somatic practitioners out there that, in my opinion, from what I've seen, have not done enough work to have a strong life force energy component in their own body. To it's not even about holding space. It's about just being able to be with and allow another person to go crazy in a good way, releasing stuff. And so that's probably what occurred, is your system had to go into protection mode because something didn't allow you to put it out, i.e. your system felt unsafe. So I hope that answers that question. So there's a few questions that are coming up about intensity and shaking and twitching. I'm not going to get into those right now because I do need to end this call for today. What I will suggest, though, is if you have a question and you have some keywords like shaking or dissociation or freeze or anger or anxiety, just pop them into the YouTube search engine with my name, and something will probably come up. And if not, then send us a question via support email, and my team can answer to the best of their ability with my colleagues who help answer these questions. Again, to come back to the top of what I said at the hour, of course, I'm Irene Lyon, and this is here. I'm here to answer questions and just provide a little theory, a little insight. Thank you for your questions. The real deep work happens in the courses. It happens in the online space where I've created curriculums that really help you learn the deeper theory, right? Because we just brushed on the surface, but the deeper theory through not intense, I don't want to scare anyone, but comprehensive video trainings that teach about your nervous system, all the things I've mentioned, but deeper. And then, of course, the practical neurosensory exercises that teach you how to reconnect with the body and with the environment around you, and to do that at the same time. So this is the other part of this work, is we need to blend all of this together along with our consciousness so that we have in our back pocket that education, so that when we have a response, a reaction, we're activated, we feel a little freeze response come up, we can consciously say, oh, this is happening because I didn't get to release that thing in the therapist's office the other day. Or, oh, I'm waking up in the morning with this intense dream. God, I wonder if this is a near-death experience that I almost had when I was 5 that Irene was talking about the other day. Or, oh, this might be fatigue because my system has been driving so deeply and so hard since I was 5 years old. And that's why I have these conditions, da 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 da. So the education is super important, guys. And then, of course, the practices. So thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks for our support team popping in links into the chat. Definitely check out everything on my site, and we will be back for more Q&As in the new year. And just a note, if you are getting this now, I will be teaching my final drop-in class of the year this Saturday at 12 p.m. Pacific. It will be more movement-based, very gentle. You'll need to be able to lie down on the floor comfortably on a hard surface with a yoga mat or a carpet. It's all about intentional movement and using that to calm our monkey mind, which is kind of a strange way of saying it. It's really probably calm the human mind, the human chatter. But that's what I'll be teaching. $19. It's called Drop-In Class. You can find that on our site. We'll pop that into the link below here in the chat. You just come for an hour. You get the recording if you can't make it live. I teach. We have a good time. Maybe a bit of theory gets thrown in. But this one will be nice and chill. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And we will see you next time. Bye for now.